Everybody, welcome to the press. It is February the 5th, 2026. I'm Ryan Ballengee. Great to have you here with us today. It's going to be a little bit of a LIV-centric episode that's not entirely on purpose. Just kind of the stuff that's happened in the last couple of days is more LIV-related. So we want to get into that today. A couple of things, the official World Golf ranking points stuff. We didn't get to talk about that. That came out basically just after we did the episode on Tuesday. And then some interesting comments that I haven't really seen get a whole lot of play in the last few 24 hours or so. Then again, I'm not on Twitter these days, so I don't really have the pulse of everything. But some comments from the CEO Scott O'Neil that I think are interesting and somewhat revealing about where LIV is and how much money they've wasted and how much money they apparently intend to waste to get to what they call profitability. So let's first start talking about the official World Golf ranking situation. The official World Golf ranking board came out ahead of LIV's first event in Riyadh that started on Wednesday evening. They're playing Wednesday through Saturday because they don't do stuff on Sunday there typically. And the board announced they would be handing world ranking points and recognition to LIV Golf events in 2026. And just 2026. Not in perpetuity, not moving forward, just in 2026. And they wanted to come up with a compromise system where the events themselves could get points and high finishers could get rewarded for playing well, but that it wouldn't be a points grab. So that the whole field wouldn't get points or the top half wouldn't get points for playing in a no-cut event with a closed system and all the other issues that kind of still exist with LIV that the World Ranking Board said explicitly. There's only 57 players. That's short of our 75-player minimum. We also know that the signature events only have 72 players, but they can have higher than that. It's a minimum of 72, right? So that they're okay to look the other way on that. That it's really a closed shop, right? The promotions tournament isn't available to everybody. It's available only to people who fit certain criteria, and the people who fit certain criteria get slotted with a disadvantage, and the guys who have different criteria get fitted with an advantage. That's why Anthony Kim, in part, still has a place on LIV. I mean, he played well in the 2 rounds that he had to play, but you get what I'm saying. Or 3 rounds that he had to play. But that those 2 issues were important. Not necessarily the 54 holes to 72 holes thing. Not so much that. And that came up in 2022, to be honest. That wasn't the stumbling point. And then the potential ramifications of a team competition at the time were a sticking point because not everybody's scores counted into the team competition. So you could kind of throw it or not be as forthright with your effort if you didn't matter to the team competition and the overall, maybe you just didn't play as well. So that would kind of mess up strokes gained world ranking, which determines field strength. And then you get your bonus points based on quality of players in the field based on their existing world ranking. So the world ranking board came up with a compromise. They would recognize the 13 individual events. One of them is still yet to be announced by LIV, where it is on the schedule, but they're intending to have 13. And the top 10 individual finishers and ties will get world ranking points based on the strength of the field. Everybody else outside of the top 10 and ties will not get anything. So what will happen is this week, the field rating for it is such that the winner will get 23 points, which is basically slightly better than the worst PGA Tour event and slightly better than the DP World Tour events we've seen this year outside of Dubai. So Bahrain got about 21 points. You're going to see the same in Qatar this week, 21 points. So a little bit higher than that. And those are full field affairs, right? So not as many quite as many high-ranked players. I mean, really, your only top 50 player and the 2 top 50 players in the DP World Tour fields outside of Dubai are Patrick Reed and Jaden Shaper. Everybody else is not, right? So that's what they're trying to put it on the level of. And again, only the top 10 players get points. That's not true on the DP World Tour side, right? More players get points. And I think that seemed like a reasonable compromise. I mean, I think that the official World Golf ranking had been trying hem and haw and trying to figure out a way to do this in a way that rewarded the best players on LIV and kind of kept the official World Golf ranking somewhat in touch of recognition of what they're playing against and what they're doing. And then all of the guys who aren't very good on LIV and are just kind of seat fillers, those guys don't really get recognition. And I think it was fine. Now, LIV Golf disagrees. They find it insane that players ranked 11th through 57th in the field can't get any world ranking points, and that they are effectively treated the same, right? Whether you finish 11th or 57th, you don't get any world ranking points. And that also happens in regular golf, right? In non-closed, non-57 player, non-LIV golf events, right? You can miss the cut, and if you miss the cut, it doesn't matter if you missed it by 1 or a million, you don't get any world ranking points. So that argument doesn't really hold any weight. It's effectively like creating a cut system, just the cut system is way higher, right? If you have a PGA Tour event where you make a cut to the top 65 and ties after, and later in the year it'd be 156, let's say, then you have slightly less than half the field getting there, but most of the players aren't going to get much in the way of points. Like if you get points for finishing 40th, it's not a whole lot to work with, right? It might as well be 0. I mean, it's not quite, but it might as well be 0. That's how you move up in the ranking, is with top 20s, top 10s, wins, top 3 finishes, those types of things. And you do it in the events with the most points. So the problem that LIV has is that there's no change of players really from week to week. Now at least there's not supposed to be. There will be in these first few events because Phil Mickelson and Lee Westwood can't play for different reasons, family issues at work or injury at work. I'm not sure with Lee Westwood. But so you'll have 2 different guys in their place, and then there's not a 4th ace because Patrick Reed is not in LIV Golf anymore. So Miguel Tabuena, who's played on the Asian Tour forever, he's the 4th ace for now. And you have some different guys in that regard. But week to week, hypothetically, if it all works right, there's no difference. There's no change in field from week to week, which means that basically the field rating should be more or less the same for a while. However, as players rack up more finishes in LIV Golf with counting tournaments that offer them no points, that's not helping them, right? I mean, it might help the field rating a little bit if they do well in the strokes gained world ranking piece of it. That's tricky to do because if you're not playing well in LIV, you're just not playing well, right? And a lot of the same guys tend to wind up toward the bottom. So the best way for LIV to improve its field ranking is for the LIV Golf players who are eligible for any of the major championships to get in them and play really well and improve their ranking and therefore improve their place in the field every week on LIV. And that makes the majors a much more pressure-packed affair for the entirety of LIV Golf that qualifies than it was in the past. That seems like a bad thing for LIV because let's just say Jon Rahm has a bad major season. I mean, he's already outside the top 50 of the world. But let's just say he has a bad major season. Let's say Joaquin Niemann continues to play poorly in the majors. Let's say Bryson doesn't do particularly well this year. I'm not saying he will or won't, just saying in a hypothetical. Say those big 3 guys just don't play well in the majors. Well, that's going to hurt their world ranking. And when they come back to LIV, that's going to hurt the value of the tournaments. And same thing with Dustin Johnson hasn't been playing well, but the few guys that are on LIV that play well, Tyrrell Hatton, outside of the major or outside of LIV in the majors, those are the guys that have to basically hold up and buoy everything that LIV Golf gets in the world ranking. If they don't, then the value of the tournaments goes down, and it's like 19, 18, 17 points to first place, which at that point you're basically playing slightly better than the Asian Tour some weeks, slightly better than the Korn Ferry Tour most weeks. And that is going to be embarrassing. It's not going to help them make up space in the world ranking. And that's also why this compromise, I think, works. Because the world ranking is basically saying to LIV, we have problems with your system, but we are willing to acknowledge that your best players are still world-class and very good. But for them to get the recognition that they think they deserve, they have to not only perform within LIV Golf, but they have to perform outside of LIV Golf to make it worth their while to keep getting points. So I think it's kind of brilliant what they came up with. I think it makes sense that LIV's a little upset about it. They didn't get everything they wanted. I don't think they should have gotten everything that they wanted. They wanted like half the field to get world ranking points, or 2/3 of the field to get world ranking points in every event. So it would buoy them up, and they'd all buoy each other. And that is not how the system is supposed to work. That was one of the big fears of trying to give them world ranking points, is effectively you'd create this system where you couldn't enter, right? You could self-perpetuate the points, but you as a non-LIV golfer couldn't enter LIV events. So it's a closed system to just the LIV golfers. And if the LIV golfers who play well in the majors bring it back to LIV in terms of field ranking, then everybody kind of props themselves up. And that's the issue. And not to get too nerdy on you, but the issues with home tour rating bonus points back in the day that I wrote about extensively, way too long ago, 15, 20 years ago in the world ranking, that's kind of what would come into play here. And so I think what they came up with is pretty good. And I think it's fair, and we'll see what happens this week. So that's that piece of LIV news. The other thing I think is really I saw this last night reading in bed. My kids finally went back to school on time today, and I thought that this was a fascinating piece in the Financial Times. Headline says, LIV Golf to be loss-making for the rest of the decade, CEO says. And it's by a gentleman named Robert Orr, published yesterday. And Scott O'Neil, who's the CEO of LIV Golf, basically told FT that it will take another 5 to 10 years for LIV Golf to be profitable. And what I'm not entirely sure of is, do they mean on an annualized basis or in general? But it says 5 to 10 years for it to become profitable, as the defections of star players cast a shadow over the start of the lavishly funded golf tournament's 5th season. Again, these guys don't write about golf, so you have to kind of excuse some of that. But it does say LIV has received about $5 billion of funding, principally from the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund since 2021, when it was formed with the ambition of disrupting golf, basically. Scott O'Neil then is quoted, and he said he faces the same pressure as any other corporate leader to turn a profit. Part of the... here we go. Quote, "This is run like a business with serious targets, KPIs, which are key performance indicators, and a ton of pressure," said O'Neil, adding that the time frame to profitability was, quote, "less than 10 and greater than 5, end quote, years." So that means that's passed into the 2030s before they could make a profit. He continues, quote, "I don't know any business worth its weight in salt that hasn't had to invest in the early years to realize what's coming down the road," end quote. This was apparently conducted in Riyadh with FT. And he said O'Neil said part of his plan to get to profitability was to sell stakes in the tour's 13 teams. So they own 2 outright, Cleeks and Korean Golf Club, as I understand it. The other 11, one of the players that defected from the PGA Tour has, or the DP World Tour, depending, has some stake in that team. And I don't know if Brooks Koepka still has 25% of Smash, for example, or not. I have no idea what happened in that deal. I assume that he still does, but I don't know that. LIV has apparently gone to Citibank to find them, or ask them to find buyers, and there are apparently, quote, formal conversations underway. Who knows what that means? The aim is to sell deals that value the teams at about $1 billion. So Scott O'Neil's big plan is to sell these 75 to 100% stakes of these teams and effectively make all the money back in that one moment, which he's not going to do. No serious person would do that. So unless you're so desperate for sports ownership in a league that principally doesn't play in the United States, has very little income streams, although they do say they've signed deals worth about $500 million in commercial deals with the likes of HSBC and Rolex, but those are long-term deals. That's not $500 million now. That's $500 million over a period of time. So basically, Scott O'Neil is hinging the entire idea of profitability for LIV Golf on selling franchise stakes. Now, mind you, that TGL has 6 teams currently, will have a 7th, and they'll have between 6 and 7, they'll have some number like that of women's TGL teams. And the TGL teams that came in, the investment groups that came in, paid somewhere between $40 and $50 million from what I understand. Maybe a little bit more on a couple, a little bidding war on one of them. But other than that, let's just call it $50 million to be simplistic. I don't know the exact deals. And then the one for Detroit was supposed to be a little bit higher, more like towards $75 million. So you basically raised $300-ish million from those quote-unquote franchises and another $75 million incoming. Let's say the WTGL franchises aren't quite as much. Let's call them 40. Maybe 30 is more appropriate. I don't know that number. Well, let's just say 40 for the sake of argument. Another 6 of them, $240 million. So that's like a half, $500 to $550 to $575 million from those 6 teams plus another. So $550 to $650 million worth of money in investment groups. And that's for a league that is on ESPN and ABC and gets significantly higher ratings than LIV Golf does, period. So you can't tell me then, with all the sponsorship deals and stuff that TGL has signed, I mean, everything is sponsored on TGL now. You cannot tell me that you would value having a LIV Golf team as more than having a TGL team. Adding in that every TGL player is a PGA Tour player, which means you get free promotion of your TGL team pretty much every week out on the PGA Tour. And you don't have to pay anything extra for that. That's a pretty great deal for you. Then the league handles merchandise sales. That's a great deal for you. I'm sure they source their own things and stuff like that. But you don't have to have a full run of employees. You've got a league office to help you out. Free promotion, PGA Tour players, better ratings, guys that win majors, right? Those, I mean, we don't have Scotty Scheffler in TGL yet. I mean, if that ever happens. But the biggest names in the game, the most recognizable names other than Bryson DeChambeau are playing or associated with TGL. So you don't get that if you invest in LIV. You don't get Scheffler. You don't get Rory. You don't get Woods. You get Bryson and Rahm. You get Bryson for maybe one more year. I mean, he sure sounds unhappy about the 72 holes thing. And doesn't sound particularly happy that he's still got one more contract year left. I think everyone in golf knows that Rahm isn't happy in LIV. So maybe they have him for one more year. I don't know how long his deal is. He didn't say this was the last year of it, so maybe it's a 4-year deal. Maybe after next year he's done. We'll see. But you're not guaranteed those players, right? So if you're investing in LIV Golf, what are you investing in? And I don't think it's much. So Scott O'Neil's plan doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. It doesn't suggest that profitability is on the horizon. He's saying that it'd be 5 to 10 years to get there if they get all the investments that they need to cover the losses they already have, and then maybe not run a loss every year because they're piling out $450 million of purse money. They've got to run the events. They've got to rent the venues for the most part. All those things cost money, right? So they've got to make over $1 billion every year, and that's outside of any of your potential investors come in for your teams just to break even. That is going to be extremely, extremely difficult right now. So I appreciate what Scott O'Neil's saying. I treat him as a serious person. I do not think he is a not serious person. You know, trying to think about the gif from Succession. You're not serious people. I'm not saying that. I think Scott O'Neil is a serious business person. However, that is probably the rosiest scenario possible, is that somehow everybody wants to throw cash at a league that has really no star power, that is seen as deeply wounded, has no significant audience on television in the biggest media market in the world, which is the United States, where almost all of the deals are done. Now, being political for a half second, if you notice that a lot of the money inflow into global markets is starting to kind of go back home a little bit because of whatever is happening at a federal policy level on trade and tariffs, okay, maybe you can make a long-term case that some of that money will come home, quote unquote, and be left internationally to invest in things. But again, that's reaching quite a bit too. So I don't really see how this comes together. I, again, appreciate what Scott O'Neil's trying to do. He has been way more successful in making the business of LIV palatable for certain sponsors. I mean, really, HSBC and Rolex kind of stand out the most. JCB, I guess, to a degree, but not really. But a lot of the companies that are involved with LIV Golf have a significant business relationship with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. That's not surprising, but that's also kind of limiting because, there are only so many that have deep business ties with the kingdom. So I don't know where you go with that. That all said, I do appreciate that he's at least willing to put it out there that, hey, stop. Basically, this is his way of saying, please stop asking me when we're going to make money. We're not going to make money in the 2020s. And we might not until the middle of the 2030s, if then. And that's only if we manage to sell these 13 franchises that have no inherent value for $1 billion each. You tell me what you think of that. All right, that's going to do it for us today on the show. Thanks so much for listening. I appreciate it. We'll be back over the weekend. We got the Waste Management Phoenix Open, WM Phoenix Open underway. The Corn Ferry Tour is underway in Colombia. We've got LIV playing its second round, I think, soon because they're 9 hours ahead, I think. So they're playing under the lights in Riyadh. And then the first round of the Qatar Masters was complete. Patrick Reed, to no one's surprise, is tied for the lead. I think he's going to try to speed run his way to the PGA Tour based on world ranking and things like that. I mean, it could be pretty interesting, but he's got to play there for a while. Anyhow, so we'll talk about some of that stuff on Saturday and get you ready for the weekend. I'm Ryan Ballengee. Thanks so much for spending some time with us. We'll catch you over the weekend right here on 2 Off the First.